What's up, dude? Hello everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So for today's case, it's about a experiment. Trigger warning that there will be photos of blood being drawn. So there's like you can kind of see needles. So if that bothers you, I'm just going to let you know that for the visual version on YouTube here, there is needle sites. So there's also another photo of a spinal tap that will be included. That one is it's in black and white. It's kind of yucky. It's not real. It's kind of uncomfortable to look at if that sort of thing freaks you out, which it does me. So I am just letting you guys know in advance. So if you want to click off of this video or just not watch it, but just rather listen to it, I would suggest that. But that's really all I have to preface this with. So let's just jump right into it. The Tuskegee. Okay, also, I am 90% positive I'm pronouncing that correct. I even put it in Google Translate to see, and it says Tuskegee. But Tuskegee is a little bit different in my ear and sounds right. So that's how I'm going to be pronouncing it. If it's wrong, I'm sorry, but also I tried. So the Tuskegee Institute was founded in 1881 by Booker T. Washington. The purpose of the school was to teach vocational training to poor/rural African Americans. They had a lot of farming programs that were super beneficial to lower income families that were trying to make it on their own. The principles of the school was to provide practical training and help the students develop economic self-reliance through the mastery of manual trades and agricultural skill. This is according to Britannica. In the 20s, the Institute switched gears from vocational training to higher academic education. It taught teachers, like it did teaching training. So a lot of the students that went to the school went on to be teachers. They became a degree-granting institute, and in 1985, it climbed the ranks and it gained a university status. Now it's renowned for its science and engineering programs, which is super cool. In 1928, the Oslo study of untreated syphilis was a study that reported on the pathologic, I don't know why when I'm looking at the word, I can't pronounce it, but when I just say it, I can say it. Anyways, manifestations, which is abdominal and anatomical, and psychological conditions and objective or subjective manifestations of disease not classified as disease or syndrome according to National Institutes of Health. That's what a pathologic manifestation is. I don't know why that's so hard for me. Anyways, of syphilis that's been untreated in several hundred white males. It was a retrospective study since the investigators pieced together info from the participants' history who had already contracted syphilis but were untreated for some time. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service at Tuskegee began a study to record the natural history of syphilis. They wanted to build on the Oslo work, and so that's why they made this study as kind of a companion study to go with it. Originally, it was called the Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male. However, now it's referred to as the USPHS Syphilis Study at Tuskegee. Initially, there were 600 black men involved in the study. 399 had syphilis and 201 did not. Participants' informed consent was not collected according to the CDC. So they didn't actually know what was going on in this study, and they were in a way baited into it by promises of medical treatment. Like that was something that the spinal tap was used for, was that like, oh, if you do it, we will give you medical treatment for other ailments and whatnot. So like I said, they were kind of baited into it and honestly did not know what was going on. The researchers involved in the study told the participants that they were being treated for bad blood, which is a local term used to describe several ailments, such as syphilis, anemia, and fatigue. So they didn't know that, like, they were being injected with syphilis. That's kind of the basis of this. They wanted to see just kind of what it did to people. Just kind of a local experiment to see what happened when you put syphilis in a person and what kind of symptoms they would get. But here they thought they were being treated for bad blood, which could mean a number of different things. The men in the study were given disguised placebos, ineffective methods, and diagnostic procedures by researchers for treatment for bad blood. So throughout this entire experiment, they were misled as to what they were actually doing and being a part of. Their compensation for taking part in the study, the men that did it, they received free meals and free medical exams, as well as burial insurance, which is, it kind of eerily foreshadows what happens to a majority of them. As the study went on, the men were also never informed that they wouldn't ever actually be treated. The U.S. Public Health Services published their first clinical data in 1934 and then issued their first major report on the study in 1936. This was before penicillin was discovered to be a safe and effective treatment for syphilis. The first patient treated with penicillin was in 1943. So 11 years after the study began, penicillin was the treatment of choice for syphilis and became widely available. Within 12 months, over 10,000 syphilis patients had been treated with penicillin. However, the men involved in the study were not offered treatment. The Associated Press released a story about the study in 1972. Because of the story, the Assistant Secretary for Health and Scientific Affairs had an ad hoc advisory panel to review the study. Now, an ad hoc advisory panel is a non-continuing, non-statutory advisory committee established by the Commission for the stated purpose of providing advice or recommendations regarding a particular problem, according to lawinsider.com. So it's just kind of an unbiased panel to help, I guess, determine, like, is this ethical? Should we keep going on with this study? Are we learning anything from it? Is it actually going to help anything? That's kind of what this panel is for. So the panel ended up concluding that the study was ethically unjustified. The results were disproportionately meager compared with known risks to human suspects involved, which is just insane. The panel advised that the study stop in October of 1972. 40 years after the study began. The Assistant Secretary for Health and Scientific Affairs announced the end of the study a month later. The panel then advised the Secretary of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare to instruct the USPHS to provide all necessary medical care for the survivors involved in the study in March of 1973. In order to provide these services, the Tuskegee Health Benefit Program was established. Now remember, they weren't going to get any medical treatment, but because it's like, I don't want to say there was a whistleblower, because really there wasn't, but because of the Associated Press article that came out about it, it's like then the public kind of saw, like, oh, this is like super wrong. You inject this group of people with a disease, and then like you just want to see what happens, but you're not going to provide care for them afterwards. Like, that is insanely messed up. So I'm sure that it was kind of a damage control type move that they made to make this program, but either way, it's a good thing that that happened, so that way these people at least could be treated. I mean, these people like that took part in the study could be treated with, or for what they were injected with syphilis. Like, I don't know. 2 years later, the participants' wives, widows, and children were included in the program to receive medical care. In 1995, the program was extended to include health as well as medical benefits, according to the CDC. Now, I kind of looked this up to figure out what's the difference between health and medical. I really couldn't find a good answer, so I just have the difference between health insurance and medical insurance. Health insurance plans cover things like hospitalization, pre and post hospitalization, ambulance, and room rent. It also extends to critical illnesses, maternity coverage, and more. Medical insurance covers only hospitalization expenses if the policyholder is hospitalized for at least 24 hours, and it only covers treatment towards pre-specialized illnesses and accidents for a pre-specified or limited amount. I got this information from iiflinsurance.com. I don't know if that's what they're actually talking about in the CDC article between medical and health benefits, but I'm just kind of assuming that that's what they're referring to. So that's kind of the difference. So at least I got something. The last participant to pass away was in January of 2004. The last widow receiving THBP benefits of a participant passed away in January of 2009. There are still 10 children of the participants receiving medical and health benefits today. Like, they're still alive and receiving benefits. A class action lawsuit was filed later in 1973 on behalf of the study participants and their families. An out-of-court settlement was reached in 1974, resulting in the families receiving $10 million. I don't know if this was $10 million to be divided up amongst all of them, or like each family got 10 million, but I'm thinking that because this was in the 70s, it's 10 million to be divided amongst all of them participating, like all the participants families to receive this $10 million of the ones that are still, living. President Bill Clinton issued a formal presidential apology on May 16th, 1997 for the study. More than 100 men involved in the study died. The whole purpose of the study was to observe the effects of syphilis when it is untreated. By the end of the study, the disease was entirely treatable. The men were told that the experiment was only going to last 6 months, not 40 years. So this is where it's like they were kind of baited into it by being promised medical care, and it's only going to last 6 months. Don't worry about it. You can handle anything for 6 months. Nope, actually, psych. They never intended to treat the men for syphilis, and it lasted for 40 years. The study has been referred to as arguably the most infamous biomedical research the most infamous biomedical research study in U.S. history. I hate when I do that. I jump down like a line too quick. The clinicians who were in charge of the study used African Americans because they just assumed that these individuals were particularly susceptible to venereal diseases solely based on their race. So not only is this like a morally wrong kind of study because of all the lies and deceit, but also this was, race motivated too, to a large degree. So I don't know. That is really wrong too. It's a very racist study. The researchers also just assumed that the participants were not interested in getting any medical treatment, which is also just very disgusting. But they thought that because these families came from poor, agricultural backgrounds, so they just assumed they wouldn't want medical treatment, which is horrible. They totally used and manipulated all the participants, and I think it's only fair that the families did get a settlement and were involved in the benefit program to get medical care. I don't know. This case was just very disgusting. It does involve people passing away from it. It's not the typical true crime stuff that I normally do where there's murders, but I just thought this was very interesting, and I have never heard of it. However, I know that there's a documentary about it as well as some other YouTube videos, so you guys should definitely go check those out. I feel like maybe this is something that we should have learned a little bit more about in school, like in psychology class. Well, maybe not psychology classes, I guess, but in science classes or something even, because this was really interesting, and I hate to say I had fun researching it, but in a way I did, just because I had never heard of it before, and here it's just really, really gross. So please comment down below your thoughts and opinions on it, as well as subscribe to my channel. This is kind of a little bit longer of a video for me. I'm trying to make my videos like 10 minutes now, so that's why it does take a little bit longer for me to get videos out, switching over to this longer format. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you decide to come back tomorrow for another true crime career video. Bye guys.